Hello, I'm here to provide you with an update on what has been happening in support pods. And let's start. So support pod aims to introduce subject-specific ticket views and ways to work, collaborate, and learn in Zendesk. It used to be known as areas of focus, but was renamed to avoid name collision with other common users of the phrase. More details can be found in epic number 145 in the GitLab com support group on gitlab.com. As support pods is an entirely new way of interacting with support requests, there's still much that we don't know. The majority of work done around support pods so far has actually been to discover these unknown unknowns, both in terms of expectations and in practice. To that end, we launched an expectation survey in July and have started a small pilot of support pods in APAC in August. If you'd like to dive into the details of the APAC support pod pilot, you can view the sync agenda document or the meeting records. I'll go ahead and share a summary of the 3 biggest things we've learned so far with the rollout of the support pod pilot. So the first thing we learned is that there is tension between actively working and assigning yourself to tickets versus collaborating and learning on using those tickets. When we first started the pilot, we asked support engineers to work out of the pod views before looking at the global views. Support engineers found that this made it hard to keep the prioritization guidelines top of mind as it became too complicated. It was also found that it was too cumbersome to have to switch between so many views to monitor for tickets which need short-term attention. Things only got worse when the second pod was introduced, as you can imagine, as now you might have to look at 2 different views or even more before getting to the global views. After much deliberation, the boring solution was to refocus support pods to focus solely on asynchronous collaboration and enabling learning outcomes. This means that the global views will continue to be the primary way support engineers should pick up tickets to work on. They should only look at the support pod views when wanting to help out with the queues without having to commit to picking up new assigned tickets. The changes that we made had the intended outcome of making work prioritization easy to understand and remember. You did not have to go to refer to the handbook or to the issue to kind of understand what is the order in which you should be prioritizing work. The unfortunate drawback here is that support engineers also found that if the workload in the global views were high, they might not actually have the opportunity to get to the support pod views at all. So this is actually something that we are still working out the solution to. And an important note about prioritization guidelines, this actually came up as a topic of discussion with some support engineers who did participate in the pilot. It was actually pointed out that support engineers could always decide to work out the pod views instead of the global views, and that it might not necessarily be a bad thing. And this is where I agree. And I think it's important to note that these are guidelines and not a prescribed way to work. You always have discretion as to how you want to pick tickets to assign to yourself, as long as what you're doing is contributing to achieving our contractual obligations, making sure that all tickets have an assignee to drive progress, and that our customers have their problems resolved satisfactorily. It's actually a fine line to walk, and these guidelines do give us general principles through which we can talk amongst ourselves as a team to understand if the way we choose to work is a net positive or negative for the team's performance. This is definitely something that we will have to have conversations about. It's not an easy fix, it's not just something you put in a handbook and call it a day. So yeah, if you do have questions about this, please engage each other, your peers and your managers in conversation. Moving on, we also learned that tickets which end up in pods will likely need to be adjusted. So the reason actually varies between pods. And between the CI/CD and instance management pods, we have identified 2 separate reasons for this. For the CI/CD pod, we found that it comprises multiple technologies which require drastically different skill sets to work. The examples raised specifically were package registry and Kubernetes cluster deployments. I can imagine that there will be others, such as static and dynamic security analysis, which would also require drastically different skill sets to work on. Yet, having these problem areas exist as their own pods would make them too small to be practical. We also have to consider that most customers encounter problems with these technologies in the context of the GitLab CI pipeline. So ultimately, this is a large problem surface area, which most likely is not very practical to subdivide. The current conclusions that we have drawn is that it most likely is a net positive to still group this together, as it reduces siloing of knowledge and provides more room for growth within the pod. There is a drawback as well, which is that the complexity that is introduced by doing this does imply that we will have to manage sub-specializations as part of some pods. So there will be some complexity involved in this if we do go down this path. The second reason is unnecessary variety in problem types. So for the instance management pod, we have found that the sheer variety of problems caused a lot of context switching and made it difficult to get into a good flow for work. For example, one ticket could be about modifying a GitLab RB file for a single node omnibus install, whereas the next ticket you work on could be about a networking problem for a 10,000 user reference architecture GitLab install. We think that the conclusion here is that the instance management pod needs to have a narrower, more focused scope, perhaps focusing on scaled architectures. This will help support engineers get into a good flow, as the problem types will be more similar than dissimilar to each other. The other conclusion that we are currently thinking about is that there are certain problem types which don't necessarily belong in the pod and should probably be considered baseline knowledge for all support engineers instead. Of course, there is a problem here as well, which is that baseline knowledge isn't really currently well defined, and defining that definitely falls outside of the scope of support pods. The newest thing that we've learned is that it seems to be challenging to manage more than one pod. Now, support engineers participating in the pilot were all assigned to the instance management and CI/CD pod, so 2 pods each. Initial feedback was that there was a lack of time to look at more than one pod a day, and it was difficult to switch mental context when switching between pods. More investigation is needed here, and we do hope to learn more about this as we expand the pilot to more people in APAC and to select people in AMA and EMEA as well. Now that you have more background and context of what has been happening with support pods, I'd like to tell you more about the expectation surveys we conducted in July and which expectations we are working on meeting and which we are choosing not to work on. We had a good mix of respondents from all regions and all role levels. Thank you so much to the 23 people who took the time to share your thoughts with us. One thing I found remarkable was the amount of alignment between support engineers and support managers. Support engineers and support managers broadly agreed on the benefits that support pods might bring to each other and to customers. I think this shows that all of us really have our customers, the team, and each other at heart, which I find really heartening. So here are the expectations. Here are the summary of expectations of benefits for customers. So this would include quicker time to resolution, higher quality of support, better representation with product development teams, improved ticket deflection, meaning that customers will not even need to contact support to solve their problems, and increased confidence in support. Based on what I shared earlier, you can tell that we are focusing heavily on helping support engineers collaborate and learn right now. So creating value for customers is not something that we want to work on within the initial iterations of support pods. We think that support pods might indirectly result in better outcomes for customers, but we are in no way promising or measuring this at this point. As for benefits for support engineers, we do expect there to be more opportunity for collaboration, to enable faster, more focused learning, to increase productivity, confidence, and happiness of support engineers, and to provide a clearer sense of progression in terms of development. Now, again, we are focused entirely on collaboration and learning outcomes for support engineers. So those are definitely within the scope of the initial iterations of support pods. At the same time, this also means that we will not be actively working on productivity, confidence, or happiness, or providing a clearer sense of progression or a clear development pathway. What we can say is that we are committed right now to not create additional overhead with support pods that will negatively impact support engineers and the work you do. And lastly, here's a summary of the expectation of benefits for support managers. So it can be expected that with the introduction of support pods, there is a clearer support engineer escalation pathway. There will be clearer training and development paths for direct reports, and there will be better visibility on the team skill gaps. So we do foresee that support engineers assigned to support pods will be expected to help out with customer escalations related to their pods. So we do want to work on this aspect. And again, the initial iterations will not be focused on development pathways or exposing skill gaps. I think that support pods will eventually provide a framework or at least enable more structured conversations around these topics, but it's not something that we are focusing on right now. Before I move on, I want to emphasize that these are all subject to change and iteration as we learn more in the pilot and in the subsequent rollout to the rest of the world. And as the practice and processes around support pods mature, we will definitely revisit this. For now, and in the spirit of iteration, this is a problem for future us. The next slides do go in more depth into the expectations raised around support pod benefits for customers, support engineers, and support managers, and also the potential downsides which have been identified. I won't be covering these in the video and leave it to you as the viewer to read asynchronously. Here's a preview of what it looks like though. So each section has a summary and also full quotes which illustrate each point. The comments which we received from everyone who participated in the survey were really insightful and could actually really apply to daily work even outside of pods. I highly recommend you view this just for the insights. So the links to the slides can be found in the support week in review for the week ending September 3rd and in the video description. Do check it out. Thank you for watching. And I hope if you have any questions, please send them our way. So you can contact either myself, VG, or Jane, or Sean. Thank you for watching.